really like attention, don't you?
You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
You want me to knock you in the head?
Well, I want you to swear to God on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Okay.
If you walked on the moon, we're given the opportunity to swear to God that you walked on the moon.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to get the hell knocked out of you if you don't leave me alone.
So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Seibel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator in NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight. I don't hit people, but you're going to be on the deck unless you get...
I'm heading out. I appreciate it.
And get the hell out of the black house.
It's okay.
Well,
take your stuff and get the fuck out. Why don't you quote me and say it's bullshit?
And the shadows in the wrong place. I don't give a damn about all that shit.
You're full of shit.
Of lunar orbit being falsified.
Being falsified?
Correct. We got an unedited tape from a source at the Johnson Space Center.
Yes. Totally nonsense. Mr. Seibel, you do not deserve answers.
If you show this publicly, you're open for a lawsuit. Okay?
Hello, and welcome to my show. My name is Madison Star Moon. Joining me tonight for this very special broadcast is one of my all-time heroes, one of my favorite producers, favorite people on Earth, Bart Sabrell. He is the man that has single-handedly debunked NASA and their moon landing. So I am just totally honored to have him on the show tonight. How are you doing, Bart?
Pretty good, Madison. What about yourself?
I'm a little nervous, to be honest with you, to have someone, of your standing on my show. I mean, this is just a huge honor. Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody who you are?
My name is Bart Sabrell. My website is my last name, Sabrell, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL.com. If you go there, it'll link you to my YouTube channel, and you can watch A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon or Astronauts Gone Wild to know what we're talking about. Basically, those two films, especially the first one, which I highly recommend you watch first, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. It's a 47-minute film. It took about 5 years to produce at a cost of $500,000, and I was already a professional filmmaker at the time I made it, making my living doing TV commercials, music videos, and corporate films. And I worked part-time also at an NBC affiliate in the news department. And around that time, I met a gentleman who worked for NASA during the 1960s as a contractor for Rocketdyne, and his job was to edit the English and the grammar and the syntax of interdepartmental memos from one NASA department to another. So as the government uses departmentalization to keep things a secret, for example, when they built the atomic bomb, there were about 150,000 people working on it, but the components of the departments were so small, a switch or a screw or whatever they were doing, that only a handful of people, maybe 8, knew what the real project was about. So the same thing was done with the secrecy of the moon mission. The person making the glove or the door or the boot, even though that may have involved 100,000 to 200,000 people and contractors, they're certainly not going to tell low-level people, hey, by the way, here's what's really going on. They're going to keep it a secret. However, Bill Casing, because he edited all the memos from one department to another, he was one of the few people who had a great overview of what was going on. He also had high security clearance. And he came upon a memo in about mid-1960 that said that von Braun had estimated the likelihood of a successful manned landing and safe return on the first attempt at about 1 in 10,000. So when Nixon became president, they decided, rather than risk killing people on live television, which would be very disastrous. I mean, imagine Carter, when he tried to rescue the hostages and those helicopters crashed out in the desert, it basically ruined his chances for re-election. And that's simply, to rescue a few hostages here on Earth. Can you imagine setting out to accomplish one of the greatest feats ever set forth and do it on live television and then fail? And so the one way they could guarantee a successful moon mission was to stage it. Just like in poker, if you're, outmatched, you go all in and people back off and they believe it. People wanted to believe it. So I was only 4 years old at the time, asleep in bed, but my father was in the Air Force and he got a kind of a courtesy VIP package as an officer of all the pictures from the moon mission. And I had them up on my wall from about age 4 to 14, and I was the biggest fan of the moon missions. And then I saw this gentleman who worked at NASA. He was one of the first guests on the Oprah Winfrey Show, say that it was fake. Kind of planted a seed in my mind, and I started looking at some of the pictures, and ended up about 10 years later, I'd become a filmmaker and was editing a video for the producer of that program. And I said, "Do you remember the guy on your show who said we didn't go to the moon? Do you remember his name?" He said no, but he put me in touch with the production company in San Francisco. And when I called them, they said they were days away from deleting all 10-year-old files, and I had just barely been able to track down this guy. And he at the time suggested, being a filmmaker, that I make a documentary about the moon landings being fake. Now, at that time, I still thought they were real, but I thought, there's at least a possibility that they were fake, seeing how most of the astronauts could not give interviews, and that the Soviet Union was about 5 times more advanced than we were. The administrator of NASA resigned days before the first mission. There were unusual homicides among astronauts and things like that. I thought, there's at least a 1 out of 4 chance that the moon missions were fake. But at the time, I'm young, in my 20s, and I had the thought I want to have a family and someday. And I thought, if the moon missions are fake, and I'm the one overturning these rocks, and I kind of have a relentless personality, I thought I could be risking my life. So why should I die for someone else's, lies? So I actually turned down the project initially. And 5-10 years went by. I became a Bible-believing Christian and realized that we're all going to die anyway, that there is a dividing line between right and wrong, and light and day, night and darkness, and everything, and sin and righteousness. And so I said, well, why not? If they didn't go to the moon, the way that I look at it, Madison, that would actually be more profound of an event than if they had actually gone. I mean, let's say they could go, they could plant a flag with 1960s technology on our neighboring, heavenly body and come back. That would have a certain level of significance historically to mankind. But if they could not go, and they lied about it, and they faked the pictures on national TV, murdering people to keep it a secret, all because they could not admit that they bit off more than they could chew, I think that is more profound of an event historically than if they were actually to have gone. And about 3.5 years into this 5-year project, we found classified footage of them faking one particular shot over and over again with the CIA on a hidden channel of audio telling them how to fake it. And lo and behold, they really did not go.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger. We're coming in on Earth.
Again, the illusion they are attempting to create is the Earth at a distance to demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public, and these conversations discussing their deception were believed to be private. Until now. Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil, we just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get the playback, we can sort of correlate what we're seeing. Thank you very much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other ones. spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls of the spacecraft appearing to be the blackness of space around it. That is why they wanted the interior dark and blocked out the sun from entering through the other windows. Here you can see the extruded window, probably 2 inches thick at the bottom. This is because the Earth's shine is coming in at a downward angle. It also causes the Earth to appear to be an irregularly shaped circle, for you are seeing the outside of the window at the bottom and the inside of the window at the top, which together form 2 different sized halves of a circle. Subsequently, this take was never used. As they perfected the shot, a crescent-shaped piece of black material was inset slightly into the window to create the illusion of the Earth's terminator line dividing night and day. It is uncannily convincing. During this segment, intended to be edited and played back later for the worldwide television audience, dated July 18, 1969, Neil Armstrong condemns himself as he states that he is 130,000 miles out, or halfway to the moon, as the NASA flight log also states on this date, when he is in reality in low Earth orbit of a few hundred miles.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Here, during another segment, also intended to air after review, Neil Armstrong falsely explains to the viewers how the shot is attained by putting the camera's lens to the window's glass, as it would have to be if they were the claimed distance away from the Earth.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera.
If the window was completely filled up with a TV camera, as he stated, then an astronaut's arm would not be able to get between the camera and the window, as it obviously does here in this outtake.
South America becomes invisible just off beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow.
You can also notice how the astronaut operating the camera reacted to the mistake by attempting to pan away from it.
Blue cast. See white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth.
This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronauts at work, and apparently the stop button popped back up on the recorder without notice. Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up and you can see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey away? Furthermore, if they genuinely went to the moon, why would they be faking any part of it? Why this trickery with the window? By faking being halfway to the moon, it becomes apparent that they did so because they could not even go halfway.
So what we have is one of the greatest events in human history is the faking of the moon landing because of our lack of character and our fear and our greed and our pride. And so that's kind of my story.
Yeah, that's truly amazing. And I've seen all of the footage that you're speaking of. How did you get that footage?
Well, I contacted NASA as a journalist. I was working for NBC at the time, and I said, hey, I want to do a documentary special on the moon landings, which is true. You know, Jesus said, be as shrewd as a snake and innocent as a dove. I'm not about to tell them, hey, I'm trying to prove the moon landings are fake. Send me all your mistakes, please. So I just told them, you know, the truth, which was I am doing a documentary about the moon landings. Now, they assumed it was going to be about how I, like everyone else, thought they were real. And to my knowledge, no reporter had ever gone through every single photograph and video footage from the first moon mission, but I did. I figured if they faked it, they're more likely to have made a mistake the time they faked it because they never faked it before. So I asked for every video, every recording, every still picture from just the first moon mission. And what I got were a series of videotapes that were really the same thing over and over again. Everything was pre-edited, and I said, you know, I want some unedited footage, but there wasn't any. And I had already started editing the film together, and I wanted, for dramatic effect, you know, the launch to be from like 1 minute down to 0 without any edits. But all the tapes I had would like go from -3 minutes to 2 minutes to 1 minute and jump to 30 seconds and 10. And so I kept going through all these tapes exhaustively. And finally, like second to the bottom, I pop in a tape and it says on the screen, do not show to the public. I'm thinking, oh, this should be good. And what was on the tape and on the label were two different things. Bill thinks I was sent something intentionally. I think maybe it was an accident. I don't know. A clerical error, you know, 50 years ago that no one noticed because no one had ever gone through every tape like I did. One tape that should have been in the private pile was mislabeled and put in the public pile. And on this tape, they're doing a fake shot pretending to be halfway to the moon when they're still in Earth orbit. The thing is dated 2 and 3 days into the flight where they're supposed to be halfway to the moon. But you can clearly see the big, you know, bright Earth out the window, and the astronauts are actually faking this shot themselves. And you can see this, and a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, which is linked at Sibrel, SIBREL.com. And when I popped in the tape, Madison, I'm like, oh my gosh, they really didn't go to the moon. I mean, I must have said, oh my God, about 100 times in 2 minutes. Right. I just could not believe it. I'm seeing them really faking it right in front of me. And I call up Bill and I'm like, Bill, they really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. And I'm like, yeah, but they really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you.
Yeah.
And he just thought it was the funniest thing. 3.5 years, you know, into the film, and probably, you know, 8 years since I knew him, he finally convinced me, you know, or the evidence finally convinced me. And he's like, well, Bart, I tell you, the funniest thing, watching me, you know, come to the realization that they really didn't go. He thought it was so amusing to see me go through that.
Yeah. Now, I know that you've presented this tape to several of the astronauts from NASA.
Yeah, just hit play.
Well, it goes on.
This is, what is this? Oh, this is a shot from 130,000 miles out.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's from approaching. It's from approaching the moon, looking back at the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've seen this on a couple of flights. Was this something that you got? Although this is from Apollo 11, did you shoot a shot of the Earth like this?
Mm-hmm.
So you had a TV camera in the spacecraft.
That's correct.
And this is, I guess, the Earth zoomed in at a distance.
Yep, seems to be.
They get shot a little bit halfway to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's kind of, now I guess the cloud cover looks.
That's what you're looking at.
Now what is that right there?
What is what?
There's like an arm. It looks like hair on an arm getting in front of the window.
Maybe somebody got their arm in front of it.
Now I thought that was the arm of God moving across the Earth. I couldn't quite figure that out.
I suspect that was the edge of the window, more than likely, that they were shooting at.
What did the Earth look like from a great distance? There it is again, 130,000 miles out.
About like that.
So it's pretty small at the distance of the moon?
Yes, but I think the better images are the Hasselblad images that have been taken on every flight and are the most published pictures in the history of the world.
What is that in the top left? If that's the Earth, is that like another spacecraft?
No. That, I have no idea what that is. It's some aberration on the film of some sort. Oh, those are shadows, I think. Or reflections, probably reflections that are just reflecting.
Run that back again so we get another shot of it.
What is their reaction to your evidence?
The second film, about 3 years after A Funny Thing Happened on the Moon came out, I guess from watching, TV as a kid and all these crime dramas or courtroom scenes where you swear on the Bible that this is true, I thought, well, why not just track down some of the astronauts and ask them if they'll swear on a Bible, whether they walked on the moon or not.
Would you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon?
You bet your sweet ass.
Okay, put your left hand on the Bible. Put your left hand on the Bible. Raise your right hand and say, I, Edgar Mitchell.
I, Edgar Mitchell.
Affirm.
Affirm.
Under penalty of eternal damnation.
I don't believe in that, but penalty of eternal damnation.
That I walked on the moon on Apollo 14.
That I walked on the moon on Apollo 14.
Well, you're the first astronaut to do that. We asked 6 other astronauts to swear on the Bible, and they refused to do it.
Well, I don't particularly like to take oaths like that either, because I don't accept the Bible as a gospel of anything except a historical record.
Some of them won't give interviews. We had to literally track them down at a public event or follow them to the grocery store or something like that. And then others gladly, will lie. They charge $2,000 an hour cash for interviews. Okay. And
wow.
I booked them and said, hey, I'm doing a documentary about the moon landings. Again, they assumed that I believe they were real. And in one particular case, we were interviewing Buzz Aldrin. We had 2 cameras set up and a monitor, and we showed him the fake footage that he shot. And he said, oh, and this makes you a real famous person for having discovered all this. What an ego you must have to want to become successful like this. Well, that's an admission that I'm right. And when he realized he had admitted that I was right, that the moon landings are fake, then he said, if you show my remarks to anybody, I'm going to sue you. And I'm like, please sue us so I can go to court, and prove to the world that the moon landings are fake. That would be great. So
has anyone ever tried to sue you?
No, that would be great. No, they're afraid to go to court because we're in the right. They did not go to the moon. We could bring forth experts on radiation, why they didn't go, on the lunar module, electricians, how it could not possibly power air conditioning against 250 degrees down to 72 degrees for 3 days on a bank of car batteries. We could bring in, filmmakers who could say, this is what sunlight looks like, and this is what lighting in a television studio looks like. And I'd base my 100%, reputation that this is fake artificial lighting in a TV studio. That's what they would be up against. So they would never do that, and I hope that someone would fund, an effort. I wouldn't want to sue NASA necessarily or sue the astronauts. What I would do is from what I understand, it's called a declaratory judgment. It's as if I bought a Picasso from somebody. I later believe it's a forgery. I go to court simply to prove the authenticity of the painting based on expert testimony of people in that field. What we would do, we would take this window shot, go to a court, and say, is this the Earth floating in space halfway to the moon, or is it a forgery? And I think it's super clear that it's a forgery. And we would subpoena the astronauts, the 2 surviving astronauts of Apollo 11, as eyewitness, experts, and they would have to show up. They're required by law to show up and testify. And I think it would, unravel. Unfortunately, out of all conspiracies in the world, almost all of them that I know of are terrible, tragic events. For example, whoever shot JFK, whether it was Oswald or Bush Sr. or the Mafia or the Soviets, he's still dead. And whoever did 9/11, whether it's the Saudis or the Iraqis or Cheney, 3,000 people are still dead. But the moon landing is a positive conspiracy. During the time of the Vietnam War, President Nixon, who was president at the time, said, the domestic protests against the Vietnam War are the #1 threat against America. So what better thing than to have a pep rally, and a guaranteed pep rally, a guaranteed fix that our horse will win. Imagine there's 20 horses and you got it fixed that yours is going to win. I mean, that's a great thing, for publicity. And that's what they did. They had a 100% guarantee that the moon landings would be successful because they staged it. They were up on the rocket and they splashed down, but they just never left Earth orbit. I mean, all you have to do is realize here we are 50 years later, a half a century, 5 decades later. 5 decades later, there is 1 million times the computing power in a cell phone than all of NASA had when they allegedly went to the moon on the first attempt. And to say that the farthest a manned vehicle can travel now is 250 miles away from the Earth, but 50 years ago, they could go 1,000 times farther. Technology does not go backwards, unless the moon landings are real. The technology went backwards, but it doesn't. Therefore, they're not real. I mean, it's so simple. It is so simple. If they can go to the moon on the very first attempt with 1 millionth computing power of a cell phone, there would be bases there by now, right? It's so simple. But people want to believe it. It's the Santa Claus for adults. People who have any intellectual capacity, whether they're a teacher or in aerospace or whatever, they say, we went to the moon. Like, we won the Super Bowl. Oh, which team were you on? Oh, well, I wasn't actually on the team. Oh, so you were in the stadium? Well, no, not actually. I was watching it on TV. Okay. And we went to the moon simply because they saw it on television. I mean, it's amazing. It imprinted it in their minds. And you try to take that away from somebody, it's like telling them their mother was an axe murderer before you were born, and even if it's true, they don't want to know. I've talked to professors at universities who I said, what if you saw Buzz Aldrin confess on national TV that the moon landings were fake? And he said, I would still think they were real. And, and we're supposed to be delusional? I mean, this is just an emotional thing that defies logic. That they could go to the moon in 1969, but they cannot even go, 1/1000th the distance today. That makes no sense.
Now, why do you think Why do you think other countries haven't, spoke out against this and said, we know that they didn't go?
Well, it's mutual blackmail. Everybody's got a spy agency, and everybody's got skeletons in everybody's closet on record, right? We've got stuff on the Chinese, and the Chinese have stuff on us, and vice versa, and the Soviets, and the Israelis, and the Indians, and the Japanese, or whoever. And it's just negotiated. We'll keep quiet about this. I mean, there was one Soviet ambassador who said that day that moon landings were fake, but he was told not to talk about it. It was negotiated, whether it was, selling oil or grain or whatever it was. This is all about money and trade deals. There really is no enemy of America other than 1 or 2, terrorists out there. Who wants to physically conquer the continental United States? Whose ships are right now at our border? Whose troops are at our border, ready to come in and take over our country? Nobody, and it hasn't been the case for over 100 years. The Chinese and the Soviets can barely manage their own countries and economy. There are no nation enemies of America. Now, there may be leaders who talk bad about us in North Korea or Iraq, but the fact is, if they attacked us, they would be bombed into oblivion, and they know it. So there are no enemies. But we have the military-industrial complex. All of this money, billions and trillions of dollars, is made off of having boogeyman enemies, And so that's why...
Yeah, manufactured terrorism.
Yeah, I mean, we have to have a boogeyman, otherwise there's no need, for the Army and the Air Force and all this stuff. It's incredible. The United States spends 20 times more on the military than the next 19 largest militaries in the world combined. I mean, it just boggles the mind. Eisenhower tried to warn us of this. He said, there should not be a Pentagon, a War Department when there's no war. And he said they're making so much money off of the armaments and everything that this is a threat to our country. When people swear allegiance to the Constitution, they say against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
And domestic.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We forget half of the enemies of America are citizens. You know, whether they're Bush Jr., Bush Sr., Cheney, whoever the true evil people are, I don't know. I'm just throwing names out there. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Kissinger and all these guys in the Pentagon and all these longtime government people, Illuminati, whatever they're really doing, pedophiles. Who knows what they're really doing in the real life? But there are people who shot Kennedy, and I can assure you they're Americans. And there are people who did 9/11, and I'm 99% sure they're Americans. And the people who faked the moon landing, you know, they're Americans. And so Americans, you know, these evil people in government, they are the ones our founding fathers warned us about. They're the Benedict Arnolds right now who are messing the reputation. People get mad at me for saying the moon landings are fake when they should be mad at the government for faking them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. They think Buzz Aldrin is a national hero when he's one of the biggest liars on the entire planet. We live in a country that is so far from God, they give congressional medals of honor to liars. They give peace prize to people who bomb hundreds and thousands of civilians into the grave. I think it's unbelievable. That's the world we live in.
And Buzz Aldrin is probably, out of all of them, the biggest opportunist. You know, he seems to be the one that's been reaping the benefits of this perpetual lie monetarily.
And I guess it's mine, in a way, to do things when they've been researched and worked out as far as a business arrangement.
And did he charge you $2,000 for an hour to speak with him?
Because he was promoting a book, he did not. But if we had not made it part of his book promotion, in fact, if you see the interview, he says, "Wait a minute, I don't give free interviews unless it's about my book." You see what I'm saying? When you're out to sell a book, he'll give you a free interview. But if it's anything else, he charges. Eugene Cernum and Edgar Mitchell and Alan Bean, they all charge us $2,000 an hour, and they demand it in cash.
It's really interesting about Neil Armstrong, how he never gave interviews. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's my understanding, I've done a lot of research on his biography, that prior to the faking of the moon missions, he was a pretty decent individual. And if you look at their faces, I only show their faces during their one after press conference, their post-fight press conference in August of 1969, and they all look like they're at a funeral of their mother who just died. They don't look like, the winning camp in the locker room after the Super Bowl victory. And you can see in their faces, it's killing their souls to be lying to the world through their teeth about this accomplishment. And so he just didn't want to lie about it. So that's why he very rarely gave interviews about it. That's why Michael Collins, very rarely. We had to track him down, follow him to the grocery store to get him to say anything on camera.
How do you track these people down? How are you finding them?
Well, we hired professional private detective agencies to track down where they live through their Social Security numbers and all this stuff, and found out where they live.
Wow.
And we have one of our investors. These films cost $1 million, and one of our executive producers, he wishes to remain anonymous, is a multimillionaire, presently on a board member of an aerospace company building rockets for NASA. Just use your imagination. Think who that might be. Okay? Person.
Yes, I know
who the one backing that person is the one backing these movies of mine. He's the one who put up the money. Can you imagine? A person who might publicly say, "Hey, I love NASA and let's work with them and going to wherever, Mars or the moon, whatever." Secretly, they are financing me. And
that's an inside job.
They know from being there. They know because their IQ is like 165. They know from an engineering point of view, the lunar module was a joke. The Saturn V rocket didn't have enough fuel to leave Earth orbit. They know all of this stuff. They know about the radiation beyond Earth orbit. You know, they know for sure. They think it's disgraceful to science.
Right.
You know, this person isn't a believer. What's that?
Yeah, tell everybody about. Let's talk about the radiation now. Why is it impossible for man to get to the moon right now?
Well, the way I look at it is, first of all, let's look at where they do have bases. Let's look at a place where they have bases where it's almost unplanetary environment. That's the South Pole. The South Pole has hurricane force winds almost all the time. Its average temperature is like minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, can you imagine what that would be like to have 100 degrees below zero and 100 mile per hour winds most of the time? You know, and yet there are bases there. Now, why? I'll tell you why. Because it's humanly possible. And maybe barely humanly possible, but it's humanly possible, therefore they're there. If it were humanly possible to go to the moon in 1969 with 50 years less rocket and computer technology than we have now, there would be bases there by now. The fact that there are not bases on the moon right now is proof itself that it cannot be done. Because if it could be done, there would be bases there. It's as simple as that. Now, one of the reasons why they can't get there is most people don't know, you know, the space shuttle, when they think it's way up in outer space, it's only 250 vertical miles up. So pick the city where you live, pick a spot that's 250 miles away, turn that horizontal to vertical, and that's the only distance they are above. If you had a 1 foot globe, that'd be about a half an inch above the globe. That's as far as they can travel into outer space. Can you imagine that? And they're saying they went 30 globes away 50 years ago. Well, starting at about 1,000 miles up, which is 4 times higher than the space shuttle or the space station is, begins a field of radiation called the Van Allen radiation belt, named after the discoverer. It's approximately 25,000 miles thick. You would have to go through it in order to reach the moon. If you orbit the Earth, you know, below it, you're perfectly fine. But it's this intense field of radiation. It's caused by the magnetic field of the Earth, and it basically collects all this solar and galactic radiation from the beginning of time, however long you believe that to be. Van Allen, who sent up a probe, you know, in the late 50s, and you can research this there's an article at the Sleuth Journal, which is, you might link in the description of this video when you post it. If you go to Sabrel.com, the Conspiracy Corner, keep looking for this article about the moon landing. I think it's called Crappy Anniversary. Did we land on the moon 47 years ago? You can do that as a Sleuth Journal search. And it has an actual, you know, download of this magazine from August 1957, an article written by the discoverer of the radiation belts. And he says that the radiation belts are 5 to 100 times a lethal dose. Okay. There we go. So they have to go through them twice to reach the moon and then again to come back. And yet he said in 1957 they were 5 to 100 times a lethal dose. Now, so there you have right. Then the Orion spacecraft, which I think launched in December of 2015, the spokesperson, he's a guy in his 20s, works in NASA. The Orion is the latest, vehicle to allegedly go beyond Earth orbit. And he said on a NASA video that we must first learn how to protect astronauts from the Van Allen radiation belt before we can send people through it. Admitted the technology does not yet exist to send astronauts through the radiation belt. I'm like, well, then how did they reach the moon? So I call up NASA and say, hey, this is journalist Bart Sabrel. Mind if I interview Kelly Smith? They said, yes, we very much mind. We don't want you to talk to him. If you have any questions, please put them in writing. And I asked some, really innocent questions like, who developed the Orion project and what soundtrack did you use in the background of the video and Well, things like that. And they answered every question. Then when I asked, well, you had 2 Geiger counters on the Orion spacecraft. It went up 3,600 miles and came back. So if you go to the store and you U-turn and come back home, the destination is the store, right? So if you go to 3,600 miles and U-turn, whatever's at 3,600 miles, that's your destination. That's the purpose of the mission. That is, right there in the middle of the Van Allen radiation belt. The whole point of the mission was to go into the radiation, measure it with 2 Geiger counters, and to come back. The whole point is what were the readings on the Geiger counters? So I asked them, about the radiation, and they ignored it and ignored it and ignored it. I finally said, what's the readings on the Geiger counters? They said that's a classified secret. I'm like, wait a minute. Is the temperature of the sun a secret? Is the amount of hydrogen in Jupiter's atmosphere a secret? How could it be? It's just a part of nature. That's like saying the temperature in Tahiti is a secret. It's a military secret. There's no reason for that, right? So why would the amount of radiation in the radiation belt that surrounds the Earth, which is simply a part of nature, like the temperature of the sun, why would that be a secret? There's no reason for it to be, unless disclosing it would prove that there's no way that the astronauts of the alleged moon mission is going to survive going through it. And that's what the release of the information would prove. That's why their own spokesperson on camera said, we must first learn to protect astronauts from this radiation before we send people through this region of space. He means that technology does not yet exist to leave Earth orbit because of lethal radiation. So then how could they go to the moon, all those times, and they're still living into their 80s without, any cancer? That's a little odd, don't you think? Yeah. It's basically one, it's like the generation, millennials, they're in their 20s or whatever, that they are admitting that the moon landings are fake. They just did. I mean, they just said so. Yeah. And it was kind of reported in 1994 when the space shuttle went up to 360 miles. The radiation was so intense that they could see it with their eyes closed as fireworks. And then CNN said the radiation surrounding the Earth is more dangerous than previously believed. But that discovery was made in 1994. More dangerous than previously believed, which was when the Apollo astronauts went through it. So how is it that space shuttle astronauts more than 600 miles away from the radiation know more about it than the astronauts who were in the middle of it? They were not in the middle of it, and they were actually closer to the radiation than anyone had previously gone. That's why it said the radiation belt surrounding the Earth is more dangerous than previously believed, which was the Apollo mission. So that's another proof that the moon missions are fake, right in the news. And then some museum curator, in Amsterdam watches a funny thing happen on the way to the moon. He gets curious. Neil Armstrong, allegedly in 1969, personally picked up this rock and then personally gave it to, the ambassador of the Netherlands or wherever that is. And they put it in a museum and they hermetically sealed it, and it's been there, for the last 40-something years. And then finally, one of the museum guys gets curious. He's seen the film about the moon landings being fake, and he opens it up, puts it under a microscope, and it's a piece of petrified wood. Now, to my knowledge, there have never been trees on the moon. So the moon rock that Neil Armstrong personally brought back is a forgery. That's in the news. So no one asks, well, if the moon rocks are fake, what about the moon mission? You know what I mean? There's all this evidence out there that the moon missions are fake, and no reporter ever does anything about it. I asked the New York Times, they interviewed me. I asked him, he was doing a story about how isn't it interesting that some people think the moon landings are fake, and now it's 30 million Americans or more believe it's fake. In fact, it's getting more like 60 million. And he was doing the story simply for that. And I said, well, what do you think about them faking being halfway to the moon and the third track of the CIA talking to them? What do you think about that? He said, well, I can't explain that. And he went on to say if he did a story about how the moon missions might actually have been fraudulent, he would be fired. So if you're a journalist, if you write a story about the truth, you will be fired. And that's out of the
because all the media's been sold out.
Yeah, that was a guy, I think, with the New York Times or Washington Post. I forget. It's pretty sad. That's one of the major newspapers of the world.
Yeah. In one of your interviews, the man's son actually threatened to have the CIA whack you. Did you ever hear anything else about that?
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?
Well, the Bible says that if you curse someone who does not deserve it, it will fall back on you. And that man, young man, died in his 20s of cancer a few years after uttering those words. Basically, his father, Edgar Mitchell, had this reputation of being this peace guru, and when he found out the interview was about how I believe he did not go to the moon, he said, I normally don't hit people, blah, blah, blah. I turn my back to him, and 5 seconds later, he hits me from behind. He can't even go 5 seconds without lying, so they don't hit people, and then he hits the person when their back is turned on. Then we, have these expensive wireless microphones on him, which would probably be crystal clear for half a mile. And when we're loading the camera in the back of the rental car, it's still recording, and we left the microphone on him. And so, just because it's on one person, you can pretty much hear everything in the room. It's that good of a microphone. So often you only have to mic one person, you don't have to mic the other people. And we hear his son saying, hey, do you want to call the CIA and have me executed? And we had a person transcribing, all these interviews, and I didn't, listen to it. I stopped, listening to it after that segment. And she's like, hey, they threatened to call the CIA and have you executed? I said, no, okay, you're kidding me. I said, no, it's on there. I said, really? So I get up and put it in, sure enough. Now, the thing is, if they really went to the moon, and I thought otherwise, why would they need to execute me? Now, if they really did not go to the moon, and the CIA perpetrated it, and I'm exposing it, then you could see why they might want to kill me. But why would they want to kill me if they really went to the moon and be irrelevant, right? It's like when I confronted Buzz Aldrin, if I really walked on the moon and someone thought otherwise, I would find that hysterical. I would swear on a stack of Bibles. Are you okay? You feel okay? Yeah, of course I wish I could have taken you with me to prove it was true. You okay? But it was like I walked up to him in front of his wife and said, how's your girlfriend? I saw her the other day at the party. She said, you and her spent the night together the other night. Are you two? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that in front of your wife? And then he'd be mad. And so he had an entourage around him who thinks he's this great American hero because he walked on the moon. Well, he's the exact opposite. He's a traitor to every American, a traitor. And yet he's called a hero. That's pathetic. That's the state of our country, isn't it? And that's why he reacted so violently. It's because
that's amazing that his son passed away. I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Well, it was Edgar Mitchell's son who passed away, not too long after making that threat to me. And I don't know. It just our country is lost. The world is lost. And the moon landing conspiracy of all of them, whether it's fluoridation or chemtrails or JFK or 9/11, all those are fascinating things, and they all might be true. But the moon landing is the most symbolic, in-your-face, lying to your teeth. The entire thing is a conspiracy. Kennedy was killed. The conspiracy is who did it. 9/11 happened. The conspiracy is who did it. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
But the moon landing, the whole thing is contrived from the very beginning. It's 100% a lie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's done
with
the taxpayers' money. Money is taken from them to deceive them. The government is breaking their own laws. Propaganda is illegal since 1947. I think it's President Truman said, the government doing propaganda should be illegal. We should have a free press. Well, the faking the moon missions is, obvious propaganda. Then there was the quiz show scandal of the 1950s, where Time magazine had on their cover the smartest man in America. It must be true if it's on the cover of Time magazine. After all, they said we landed on the moon on the same cover. Oops, it was a forgery. The guy got the answers in advance. He was not the smartest man in America. Time magazine was wrong. Time magazine was deceived. and unintentionally passing on greater deception. So Congress passed a law because of the quiz show scandal. They said you cannot use television to deceive people. The government broke that law. Isn't that amazing? You know, it's just outrageous.
Yeah,
the Bible says
they break that law every day.
The Bible says that people who are leaders need to be judged more strictly, not less strictly. And yet Congress passes laws that are the exact opposite. If everyone else has certain standards for hiring people or non-discrimination rules, the Congress they don't have to obey that. See what I'm saying? And so it's upside down. It's the exact opposite of a moral society. You know, we have these high-ranking leaders who are arrested for pedophilia. I don't know if there's anything more disgusting you could do, especially if it's homosexual pedophilia they're guilty of. You know, and yet these are the cream of the crop of our leaders, and they fake the moon landing, and they do all these other outrageous things. They spend money on war after war after war and kill off the middle class who are drafted. You know, it's some outrageous. What can you do? This, to me, the moon landing is proof that the ultimate battle really isn't right or wrong per se. It's really truth and lies. That's the battle, because that leads to right and wrong. Lies lead to wrong, and truth leads to good. You know, a conspiracy, half of all crimes are conspiracies. Half are done in the passion and heat of the moment, and half are plotted out in advance. A conspiracy. And anyone who says the word conspiracy means it's not true, that's like throwing away half of all the crimes in the world. And who would want you to do that except the people perpetrating the crimes to begin with?
That's amazing. Riveting conversation I'm having with you.
I would just say, like I said, originally I turned down the project for fear it might be true, and I'd be risking my life to expose a lie that I didn't even do. But then 5 years went by, I started reading the Bible about right and wrong and realized I'm going to die anyway. I might as well die for something worth dying for. Truth is so symbolic of all lies and all conspiracies. I really believe if the truth came out, let's say one of the astronauts came forward and confessed, or the Trump administration announced the moon landings were fake, and we're going to set it right, give everybody a tax refund, and maybe really try to go. It would peel away, this veil, this slumber from people, both, politically, socially, and spiritually. I mean, we're all going to die. Most people believe in a God, and most people believe in a judgment. And I think this should really let us know that there is darkness in the world, and that really it's more of a spiritual battle. Politics will never solve anything. That's been going on for thousands of years, and we're still in the same state we've always been in. I think it really gets down to just the individual making the right decisions based on truth.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I feel the same way. That's why I fight chemtrails like I do. That's why I go up against the government. If they're going to come after me, they're going to come after me. If I'm going to die over this, this is what's going to happen. But I'm not going to stop fighting the good fight. This is part 2 of my riveting interview with legendary producer Bart Sabrell. We've been discussing the moon landing hoax, and I want to kind of go off into another arena here, and we'll discuss the chemtrails, because I myself am a chemtrail activist. And I want to know, Bart, what do you think about chemtrails?
Well, it's interesting. We were talking right before we went on the air about other conspiracies, and I remember one of the people aside from Bill Casing, he was a Vietnam pilot, and he told me the moon landings were fake, and before I believed that they were. And one of the things he said too was, fluoride is bad for you. I bought a water distiller. I just kind of, to be quite honest, put that in the conspiracy box that he was in my mind. And then here I am, I guess about 10 years later after he told me that, now I use a water distiller religiously, about 3 gallons worth a day. And the more I talk to people, scientists, and, people who have a reasonably high IQ, colleagues and friends of friends, they all understand that fluoride is bad for you, that for whatever reason they put it in the water to allegedly, make your teeth decay less that actually that doesn't really work and could actually work in the opposite direction, and that it tends to lower IQ, tends to cause dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that. Some people think, well, did they deliberately do it to make people docile? And then you find out in Nazi Germany, they were giving fluoridated water to people in concentration camps to help them, relax and not want to escape and things like this. And, I kind of wonder why we hear that the NSA is spying on everybody. We hear these, credible truths, and there's really no rebellion at all against the government for doing them. I don't know. Is it really, the controlling people's minds through oil in the water? I don't know. Is the world that wicked? Unfortunately, the longer I live, the more wicked I discover the world really is, even more wicked than I previously thought. The idea that people are so, I guess, prejudiced, they think they're above everybody else, that they would do such a thing to the rest of mankind is pretty sad. And yet it was discovered in Kenya, where they're trying to allegedly help, a lower developed population by giving them vaccines to cure, I think it's what's it called when you get pricked by something that's rusty.
Tetanus?
What is that? Tetanus, yeah, tetanus shot. That they had some combination of tetanus and the diphtheria, and it was being administered by the Kenyan Doctors Association, who was a pro-vaccine, group. And they analyzed it independently and found out that there was a sterilization drug hidden inside the vaccine. They became suspicious because it was being overly promoted to women of childbearing age more so than to men. And so this vaccine that is given in these developing countries are given to it by, white controlled countries to control their population. And that comes out in the news, and no one really seems to do anything about it. It's pretty bizarre. And then, the same with chemtrails. I heard about chemtrails, I guess, about the time of fluoridation, and didn't really think much of it. Thought it's one of many other not provable conspiracy theories that I throw in the conspiracy box. And then I kept getting suggestions for my Conspiracy Corner News. Hey, you should do an episode on chemtrails, and I think I've done one and maybe, one or two episodes on it. And sure enough, I live in a town that's only about 500,000 people. I live, fairly good distance away from the airport. And it seems like 5 out of 7 days of the week, just after sunrise or just before sunrise or just before sunset, there's like a grid pattern in the sky that is just outrageously visible. I know that when people who have some acreage have a riding mower, they have like in their mind kind of a pattern. They'll kind of go up and down and then across or whatever to cover geographically, every space that they can think of. And so apparently whoever's doing this for whatever reason, they're told to, to evenly disperse these chemicals and to follow a grid pattern in order to do that. And sure enough, it's like all these intersections at 90 degrees. And I did a little research that the difference, of course, between condensation trails, like when someone exhales in the winter, that doesn't linger, that fog doesn't linger in the air for half an hour. It dissipates fairly quickly. And if you're watching a genuine condensation trail out of a jet, it's generally about 10 to 20 times the length of the jet and stays that. And it, proportionally dissipates after it. But these things are staying up in the air for half an hour to an hour, and they're always in this grid pattern. And now it seems to be with even increased regularity. I have no idea why. I can speculate, but I'm more intrigued to ask you, what are they doing? Well, I don't see how this cannot be a major news story. It's so obvious to me.
Oh, it is a major news story.
And I'm like, well,
yeah, but
what are they
like
doing?
You said, the media's been sold out. It's just the same thing about why the media will not, touch the moon landing hoax, or the fact that we could have faked going to the moon. They wouldn't have to come forward and say, we know we haven't been to the moon, here's the evidence. But the fact that they don't even discuss it at all, the possibility, it's the same thing with the chemtrails. I've contacted, all my local media, I've done whatever I can do, here to try to get a news story, to try to get anyone to cover it. And because the news media, mainstream news, is sold out, they're bought and paid for by the CIA, they remain tight-lipped, and they continue to cover it up and say that it's water vapor. In my research, I personally believe they're depopulating the planet. I believe chemtrails have a multitude of nefarious agendas behind them. The Monsanto aluminum-resistant seeds, geoengineering the planet, weather warfare, radar, Morgellons, spraying stuff into the atmosphere to test different diseases on us, make us sick for Big Pharma. I mean, you could just go on and on with a list of horrible things that they're doing with these emissions. But, yeah, and so what else have you found in your research?
Well, I think the parts per million don't appear to be to a toxic level, in that if they wanted to physically poison people, they already do it through the water supply. And they infiltrate it with fluoride and all sorts of drugs and chlorine and whoever knows what other chemicals. And then same thing with food. If they wanted to poison us, they would just put it in our water and food. I don't think that the air is really the most efficient way of going about doing it. So it has to be some other reason. I only heard one interview from somebody.
Right, but when you add them all together, when you poison the food with the GMOs and poison the water with fluoride and poison our air with these toxic heavy metals that cause Alzheimer's and respiratory illness, it's going to bump off the weak and the elderly first. This is a slow kill. I don't believe that they're just, boom, putting poison in the air to kill us all, and they have to have some type of protection for themselves too, because they're poisoning themselves as well.
Yeah, so that makes me think that it's not chemtrails, and forgive me if I have a different opinion, but just like I said, if the purpose was to poison people, I think a much more efficient way of doing it would be through food and water, which they're already doing. So that makes me think chemtrails are for another reason. And you brought up a good point. Right. The president and the government officials are out there breathing the air too, so maybe it is some other reason. Then I have to think, well, what could that be? Only one person that I know of has gone on the record and said it's geoengineering. These are reflective particles of aluminum, barium, whatever, to reflect sunlight back into outer space to cool off the planet. That could be, true. It could be some sort of geoengineering. I know they've been doing that for a long time. Some people believe that it's to block the appearance of something in outer space, to somehow optically reflect that, or to make telescopes not as proficient at viewing certain heavenly bodies that are potentially hazardous to the Earth, and therefore not to provide general panic. An incoming comet or asteroid or rogue planet may be heading toward Earth, and that these are to, obscure the observation of such a thing for the longest period of time possible.
Right. I believe the mitigating global warming through their spraying operations is complete and utter disinformation. I believe that's the cover story that the bad guys try to sell us so they can continue dumping these heavy metals, chemicals, and God knows what on us. The problem with the whole chemtrail conspiracy is the fact that we don't get any answers. I mean, this is a grassroots, ground effort that, researchers and just concerned citizens are doing on their own. We don't have any help. There are a lot of people that have brought forth test results, lab results, showing high levels of barium, strontium, aluminum, lead, mercury, cadmium, uranium, and other nefarious chemicals, heavy metals, things that's not supposed to be in there. So we do actually have tests, lab results showing astronomical amounts of these elements and things that should not be in our hair, blood, water, and soil. So that's what's most alarming. The mitigating global warming, they've actually proven that jet contrails, water vapor, actually heat up the environment, heat up the Earth. So it may cool it down for a particular time, but it's actually going to heat it up in the long run. What goes up must come down. If those reflective particles are being sprayed, then they're going to come back down and then pull that. I think there's so many different, I have like 100 different theories, Bart. Who really knows what the truth is? All I know is I don't agree to be sprayed. Yep.
Well, the thing is, I had to reluctantly admit, yes, the moon landings were fake. I had to reluctantly admit to my crazy fluoride friend, I bought a water distiller too. have to admit to Madison, I used to think chemtrails were kind of silly. Now I think, oh my gosh, what is going on? And maybe part of the answer is in the regularity of it. I mean, they're doing it. It's like they have to do it every day. That it's like I don't know, keeping something warm in the oven. You have to keep it at 350, and they can't just spray once a week or once a month or once a year. They're doing it virtually every day over my mid-sized city, and so that should be a clue in there somewhere that it has to be sustained. They have to sustain a particular level of what they're doing, otherwise it won't work.
Yeah, that's horrific. One of my friends has a nurse friend that's come forward telling him how many people have respiratory illness now. That it's just an astronomical amount of new cases of respiratory illness, and Alzheimer's is skyrocketing. I mean, if we just take a look around, people are getting sick. I have a lot of friends that are just sick. They've had flus for 2-3 months, can't get rid of it. It's just disgusting. So I'm just going to keep fighting the good fight. I'm glad that you made that video. It is on your YouTube channel on Bart Sabro, and I'm glad that you don't just, stop with the moon landing hoax. I don't like when people tell me, oh, you can't talk about this or you can't talk about that. You're supposed to just concentrate on chemtrails. I mean, there's a huge agenda that's being, perpetrated on all of us. So there's many different facets to this agenda that we have to uncover. And the truth is not going to just fall in our lap. We have to dig for it. Are there any different websites or any different people that you would suggest for someone to follow that's interested in finding out the truth?
Well, in regard to the moon landing, just go to Sabrel.com and go to the YouTube link and watch a funny thing happen on the way to the moon. I think that's 45 minutes right there will prove that the moon landings are fake. Your website to show that chemtrails are real and that something's going on. I think there's a great YouTube channel out there. They could do a search for the Planet 7X channel. And that's a gentleman by the name of Gil Broussard, who's an astronomer and Sabbath-keeping Christian who believes that rogue planets that have been discussed lately in scientific journals of the last couple of years are very real. And that there's one in particular that has a pattern like a comet of making a regular pass around the sun. He believes that about every 360 years, not 3,600 years. And that, most of the time it's further away from the Earth and doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but occasionally it's close. He believes the next approach will be close and it will bring about meteor showers and very, hazardous things to Earth, or great increase in earthquakes and volcanoes and so forth. If you believe, like I do, in God and the Messiah, and that the Bible is true, and that that God, because He created everything, kind of like a clockwork, He knows where the gear is going to be before it's there because He made the clock. And I think that's kind of the movement of the stars and everything. If Planet X is somehow to end the Earth, this version of the Earth, then that could have been set in place, from the beginning of time. And that it seems to fall into perfect alignment with end-time prophecy. I talked at length on a flight, I forget where I was going to, Japan or somewhere, with the author of the most famous book about Planet X, and he knew nothing about the Bible. I had read the Bible all the way through several times and knew nothing about Planet X. And when we compared the notes, what he said would happen to the Earth if Planet X were real and were to come close to the Earth is exactly what the Bible says. Earthquakes and volcanoes and the tidal effect coming in, tidal waves maybe coming in 100 miles. There being meteor storms. Jesus says before second coming, the stars will fall like ripe figs. That's a meteor shower, And so NASA, we know, does not tell the truth. And so they're certainly not going to tell us if a rogue planet or comet or asteroid is going to be coming toward us. I can tell you that Janet Napolitano gave us a warning, just like Eisenhower on his last day warned us about the military-industrial complex. Janet Napolitano, the day she resigned, she said, a natural disaster, the likes of which the United States has never before seen, is likely on its way in the next few years. Well, what natural disaster have we never before seen? We've never seen we've seen hurricanes, we've seen earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, The only natural disaster our nation has never seen is something from outer space, a comet, an asteroid, or a rogue planet, or a meteor storm. And also, it's the only natural disaster you could predict years in advance. She said it was coming years down the road after she resigned. And of course, because of the geometrical position and movements and mathematics, you can calculate exactly when a rogue planet would be here, or comet or asteroid. So it's a natural disaster we've never seen that could be predicted in advance. So I think something like that is coming to the Earth. I think that's why people are building bunkers. I think that's why the government has written all these executive orders of what to do in the event of a national emergency, to confiscate private property and things like that. I think the reason why it's being kept a secret is because those Illuminati-type population control people at the top want to depopulate the Earth, but they don't want to go down in history as the next genocidal Hitler, so they're just going to keep this, Planet X or whatever it is, a secret, and let Mother Nature do their dirty work for them. The Bible even says that in the last days, people will go into caves, into holes in the ground to escape the signs in the heaven, the stars falling. It says the seas will, toss and turn. Planet X is estimated to be about 40 times larger than the moon. So you can imagine the exponential increase in tidal effect because of it. Jesus said the seas will be tossing and turning, men's heart melting with fear for things that are coming upon the earth from the heavens. I think something like that could very well be true.
Well, yep, you could be right. All of this is connected. I want to touch base a little bit more on your Astronauts Gone Wild video. For me, it's one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Have any of these astronauts tried to contact you since you've interviewed any of them?
Well, I like to tell the truth, so I'm just going to answer that with no comment for the best interest of everybody involved. I can tell you that, the first film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, is a better film, in my opinion, for knowing whether we went to the moon or not. It kind of lays it out argumentatively. Astronauts Gone Wild is kind of an afterthought of just kind of confronting the guilty parties with, their misdeeds. It's a little nerve-wracking to watch, even for me, and I made it. And I'm there at the time confronting the astronauts. I'd go up to Neil Armstrong and say, $1,000 cash, put your hand on the Bible for 5 seconds to pay $1,000 a second to say, I swear to God I walked on the moon, and he refuses to do it. It could be used in the future, it's a video deposition, which would make him guilty of perjury. But he chose, and more of the wiser astronauts chose not to do that. It's a little odd and unusual. That's, of course, the time I got punched by Buzz Aldrin when I called him a liar, a coward, and a thief, and things like that. And, it's I don't know that I would make the film again, today.
Yeah.
I think a lot of fans of the film think that it is good, though, for the record. At some point, the truth will come out, the moon landings are fake, and these guys are going to, history will be shown that they were given the opportunity to come clean, and they refused to do it. I mean, if you think about it, I've lived 52 years, I don't know how old you are, but in all that time of watching the news and society, has there ever been one occurrence where a guilty person, a bank robber, on the loose, or a murderer on the loose, or a child molester on the loose, ever turned themselves in to get themselves right with God or to have a right conscience? I've never known that to happen a single time. People are dragged, away, kicking and screaming. These Holocaust perpetrators, in their 90s are finally caught. The firebombing of churches that killed little children in Alabama, they're caught 50, 60 years later, kicking and screaming, saying they're innocent when they're guilty, all the way to the very end. Me personally, I fear God. I think about my own mortality virtually every day, and that I'm going to have to face God, and I'm going to have to take hold of the Messiah in order to have any chance at all of making it. I kind of like the creator of The Simpsons. It's called Futurama. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Right.
But one of the characters is a robot who's a kleptomaniac, and one day he's always calling his employees, at the company he works at, meatbags. If they're mortal, they're going to die. He's immortal. He's kind of boasting about it. He says, if I get run over by a steamroller, they just take out my memory cartridge, pop it in a new robot, and I live forever. And then his, owner says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I bought you before memory cartridges. That can't be done. I mean, when you're dead, you're dead." He says, "Well, how long have I got?" He says, "You might only last 1,000,000 years." And he says, "And that's it?" And then he says something very profound, Madison. He says, "Anything less than immortality is a complete waste of time."
Yeah.
And that is true. You see, all of the scheming that these people are doing, forgive me, Dick Cheney, if you're really innocent, please forgive me. But people like him, who probably did 9/11, who may do the next nuclear bomb going off, you know what I mean, and blame it on whoever, chemtrailing, poisoning people, putting aspartame or whatever it is that War Department guy, created and made money off of. All these evil people doing all these evil things, they're going to die. They're going to die of old age, and all their scheming will come to nothing. And even, good, quote, good people who are, living a good life and not hurting anybody and accumulate millions and boats and airplanes and mansions, they're all going to die too. And then what? It's the next life that's the important one. It's the one where we'll either be thrown away and be dead forever. There's no hell. It's just that you're dead forever.
I absolutely agree with you. Yep, that's what I believe. I do not believe in a fiery pit of torment. I don't believe any loving God would create us knowing that we're going to end up in a torture chamber for all of eternity. I don't believe a loving God could actually send anyone, even Hitler, there. So I believe when you die, he either erases you or you go on.
That's it, exactly. The Catholic Church created all the torment stuff to get people to donate to the church and get a paper of eternal forgiveness that they thought God would accept because they're God's vicar on earth in their mind. Yeah, the gift is eternal life. Jesus says it's eternal life. So if you go to hell and you're saying, "Oh my gosh, I wish I had lived my life differently forever," you also have eternal life, right? No, eternal life is only for the saved. Everyone else has eternal death. They're just like a bug. You step on a bug, the bug isn't going, "Oh, I wish I had avoided that foot. What was I thinking?" No, it's just wiped out. And that's the way, God only wants the pure in heaven, and that's how it will be. And everyone else will be squashed on. And, Jesus said, "Wide is the gate to destruction, many go that way, and narrow is the way to life." And he wasn't talking to the pagans. He was talking to the church, the religious people, the synagogue. And to those people, most people who think they're right with God, according to Jesus, are not right with God. He says, many people will say, "Lord, Lord, didn't we do this and do that?" He says, "Get away from me. I never knew you. You were never joined with me." You see? And, it's a scary thing. I mean, as great as life is, it's going to be over. And then what? As Bender said, anything less than immortality.
They wouldn't swear on the Bible is because they knew that they were lying, and then they don't want to go down in history lying against God. And they acted like it was the plague when you're going around with the Bible. I mean, they're running away from you. I mean, they're getting violent and stuff. And it's just like you said, if they actually did go to the moon, they would, first of all, they would be glad to talk about it. And in the interview that you were talking about, the conference, when the press conference, when they first got back, the first men on the moon, quote unquote, I actually posted that picture either today or yesterday on my Facebook page of these sad-looking faces, these guilty-looking men who look like their families were just murdered, and they have to talk about it now on national television. Those are not the faces of people that just, did the most amazing feat of humanity ever in history. Just came back from another world, and they're going to tell the whole world about it now. No, these are those faces of guilty liars that are really sad, and now they have to go on with this thing. And their interview wasn't compelling at all. It was obvious they were lying. I can just listen to somebody or look at somebody and tell if they're lying. And another thing I want to say about the way that you do your journalism, I think that's why I like Astronauts Gone Wild so much, is because you address the bad guy, and that's what I do. I will go right up to the person that I feel is, the government agents and FBI and whoever, and I will go and confront them about chemtrails. And that's what you do. And I think that's what I love so much about Astronauts Gone Wild is we get to see their responses, and it's obvious they're all lying.
Well, the anonymous aerospace investor that I told you about, multimillionaire person, the reason why they invested it, to them it is a patriotic issue. They believe that the government faking the moon landing was a disgrace to the honor of the country and a disgrace to science, to forge documents. It's like saying, I don't know, saccharin is great for you. Saccharin will increase your life, when in fact it does the opposite. They think that's a disgrace to the truth, to the nation, to science. That's why they invested heavily in this project. And what we have here is a group of people who robbed a bank and they stole $1 million, and they didn't get caught. So the next time they stole $5 million, and they didn't get caught. So the next time they stole $20 million, and they didn't get caught. You see, these are the people running our government. They didn't come to Congress and the Senate and say, hey, you guys approve faking the moon landing? No, they did not tell them, which means the Congress and the Senate does not run the country. And, it's gotten out that the NSA whistleblower who was with them for 30 years says that the United States Supreme Court justices have their phone calls monitored all the time. Now, if people are monitoring the United States Supreme Court's private conversations, then they treat them as an enemy. So there's an entity within our own government who considers the Supreme Court an enemy. That entity is an enemy of our country, and that is, at least on the surface, the intelligence agencies. Something is wrong here, and no one is doing anything about it. It's outrageous. They killed Kennedy. They faked the moon landing. They did the Gulf of Tonkin. They started a war that they admit was completely contrived. They did 9/11, Building 7, and all this blatant evidence, and they just keep going because no one is pursuing justice. No one is locking these people up. It comes out. I mean, a guy who works with NSA for 30 years says we listen to the president's phone calls, and it's not just Trump. It's Clinton. It's Obama. It's Bush. It's everybody. They listen to the White House calls. They listen to the Supreme Court. He admits this. It makes it in the newspaper somewhere. It's online. He admitted it, and no one is doing anything about it. People don't realize that, an aircraft carries like $12 billion. Well, that's about what Facebook or something like that is worth. So the government years and years ago bought up the New York Times, CBS, AT&T, Facebook, Google, Yahoo. They bought all of that. That's where this missing trillions of dollars black budget has gone. They own NBC. That's why they do not report on the fact that the Supreme Court justices' phone calls are being monitored and make more out of it than they should. They ignore that as a story because they're the ones who own the stations. People don't realize when you want Yahoo free mail, you click the little box saying you give them a right to scan your email. Well, that's a little polite word for read. And so what they've done is because the CIA owns Yahoo, they own the hard drives, and we've given them permission to read it. So they have a double legal reason in their mind. We own the company. We have the right, therefore, to read them. And you gave us permission, double right. You see? So that's what they've been doing. The government has secretly bought up all of these technology companies, Google, Facebook, Twitter. They own it all, and that's why they never talk about anything that's critical of themselves. Why would they do that, right? Why would they shoot themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're being spied on big time. Is there any advice that you would give to someone that's looking into, chemtrails and stuff like that?
Well, I need to take this advice too. I think we need to pray more. I'm a kind of if there's a will, there's a way kind of a guy. But I forget constantly to rely on God. To pray that the truth about the moon landing will come out. And if it comes out, it really won't be because of my doing. It will be because God wants the truth to come out. And right. I think we really just need to pray more. We need to pray for God's intercession, the angels' intercession. It's like this great vault of resources we're really not taking advantage of. And because this is really a spiritual issue. That's what it gets down to. You can be an atheist if you want, but surely rape is wrong. and stealing someone else's property is wrong. So there is good and evil, whether you believe in God or not. And so that's what it really boils down to. You know, the story, you know, the history, all that is true. The longer archaeologists dig up stuff, the more they confirm that everything in the Bible historically happened. I mean, the Bible is a very unflattering book for those involved, if you've ever read it. It's very depressing because it's nothing but human error after human error after human error, and God giving us one more chance, one more chance, one more chance. And it's very simple. Everything is simple. Einstein said, you know, God is very simple. We were made a perfect world. We fell, and God is letting it go its course, I believe, because it's some big galactic lesson. For example, you have a 4-year-old, you know, reaching for the stove top. You slap their hand, you know, no, or maybe not even slap it at first. You kind of gently push it away. Then they reach for the hot burner again. You gently push it away. They reach for it a third time. You slap that hand. They reach it for a fourth time. What can you do except let them burn their hand? I mean, otherwise, eventually the house will burn down through their error. And I think God, you know, 1,000 years being like a day and being the super parent of us all, that's why he lets, you know, this stuff go on. He doesn't cause it. People say if there's a loving God, then there wouldn't be rape, murder, and poverty and all this stuff. That's not true. God gave us a perfect earth and gave it to our governance. And if we pollute it and corrupt it, it's our doing, not his. He has allowed it to happen to show us, you know, the effect of our sin, you know, the consequences of our actions. And then eventually
I just wish that he would back us up. Yeah, I wish he would back us up more, because it's not my free will to be sprayed to death. It's not my free will to not have, you know, clean water, safe water to drink, and on and on and on. So, like, for the people that are fighting these battles, I just kind of wish that he would, you know, come in and just slap those chem tankers down like King Kong, you know, in the sky, and, like, step in and do something, because it's not fair to us. That's not our free will for the people that are the victims of these genocidal maniacs.
Well, I agree with you, but we have to see it from God's point of view. We live a tiny little mortal life, and God sees the creation of the whole universe from beginning to end. Now, let me throw this out of you. Let's say that every victim who has ever been a victim of fluoride, of chemtrails, of poisoning, of deceit, or whatever, they all get eternal life. And everyone who perpetrated these crimes who was unrepentant, they do not get eternal life. Is that fair? I think it would be fair.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're living year trillion into eternal life and got 10 trillion zillion more, and the Cheneys and all those people never made it, is that fair? Is that worth putting up with one life of misery? You bet. And I believe that's, you know, seeing it from God's point of view.
Right. I agree. It's just hard to see it, you know, when we're trying so hard to stop these people and expose them. And you are going to go down as a folklore hero for everything you've done to expose NASA. I mean, seriously, there's only one Bart Sabrell.
Well, I'm sure many people are thankful of that. The Bible does say to expose things. It says have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. So for people who claim they're Christian, who think conspiracy theorists are wasting their time, that's not necessarily true. We are to expose. It's a testimony of the truth. And then whether people listen or don't listen, that's up to them. There's a scripture about that too. It says, Ezekiel, the watchman on the wall, if he fails to warn of the coming enemy, the blood of everyone will be on his head. But if he warns them and they do nothing to heed it, then the blood is on their own heads. And that's what we're doing. We're warning people both about, you know, the symbolic things of sin, and hopefully of ways to get into eternal life as well. And whether they listen or don't listen, that's up to them.
Yeah, exactly. This has been an amazing interview. I did want to ask you one more question. We still have 10 minutes left, 9 minutes. I wanted to ask you if you had ever been trolled, because I know a lot of truthers, especially when they're dealing with a more conspiratory topic, get trolled and shilled. Have you ever dealt with that?
Well, I'm not sure I know exactly the meaning of troll. I think it means in the comment section. So what I advise everybody to do is just close the comments. It's a waste of time. I was I think, cursing is wrong. Even though I slip myself and do it, I think, it's wrong. So I would go through and delete everybody who cursed. And then that just took 10 hours a week. You know what I mean? There's only so many hours in the day. When Time Magazine publishes their story, they don't let everyone else publish their counter arguments to it. No, it's their point of view, like it or live it. When a filmmaker makes Gone with the Wind, they don't allow people to write their own endings. No, it's a work of art. When you write an article as a journalist, it's that perception, that point of view. And I don't know when adding comics to it opened up. To me, that's a complete waste of time. All that should be shut down to control the narrative. It's a waste of time to be, challenging all this stuff. Now, before I came to that conclusion, I remember I uploaded, I've been doing Conspiracy Corner episodes. I think I've done 50 episodes so far, and maybe 1 out of 10 of those, the moon landing comes up. And whatever the latest one was, I forget, but as soon as it was up there was this, big, narrative on why I was wrong. And I finally wrote the person. I'm like, why are you subscribed to me? He was subscribed to me to counter argument me. And it's like, why would, if someone comes up to me and says, Bart, I'd like to kill you, but I don't have any bullets. Can I borrow some of yours? Oh, sure, here you go. That's not very smart of me, is it? I mean, the fact is the moon landings are fake, and anyone who says otherwise, they're on the wrong side. They're on the side of evil. Why would I give them an opportunity on my own publication to shoot me?
Yeah.
That's not very smart of me, is it? So
right.
That's a complete waste of time. That's why I shut down Facebook. I shut down Twitter. I was trying to find some way I could post on Facebook without allowing people to comment, but I couldn't find a way, so I just shut it down. I closed all the comments.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. When you did that, when you weren't my friend on Facebook anymore, my first thought was, oh my gosh, Bart has blocked me. How could he do this? And I was like, no. And then I realized, your entire Facebook page was gone, and I was heartbroken because I was, I loved your Facebook page, but I understand.
Well, I mean, when NBC does nightly news and they conclude it, I don't think the next half an hour is by people who disagree with them. You know what I mean? It's their point of view, and we're to counter their point of view. They don't need it any other time. We've heard their lie that the moon landings are real for 47 years. When I'm done speaking for 47 years, then we can open it up for equal time.
Yeah. Wow. Are you planning on making a part 3 or not part 3, it would be a part 2?
Well, I don't know. If someone were to give me $100,000, I'd probably combine A Funny Thing, Astronauts Gone Wild together with commentary by me on camera and the latest evidence, and I'd, make it an hour and a half, film for theatrical release or something like that. Aside from that, I really don't like making documentaries. They're fun to watch, but they're incredibly tedious to make. I spent 4,000 hours edit A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which is only 47 minutes long. And that's 40 hours a week for about 2.5 years. And I'm writing a book called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. And if anyone wants to give me the advance to motivate me to finish it, please let me know. Otherwise, it's just tedious to try to write a compelling argument with all the facts in the right order. I prefer fiction. I want to go back just to being a regular fictional writer and fictional filmmaker and make inspiring films. There's a great film on my YouTube channel. If you check it back, it's in the Conspiracy Corner line about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 episodes, called The Sacrifice. It's a beautiful 30-minute film, and making a feature-length film of about a topic like that would be a nice thing to do. A film that inspires people to live life a little better, maybe to turn away from their sin, to have victory, to overcome, things like that.
Right. Okay, well, we're running out of time, so I want to give you a chance to plug yourself. Where can we find all of your stuff, and where can people donate to your whatever you have going on?
Well, you can just go to Sabrel, my last name.com, which is S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL.com. And from there, you'll get all the links to the films and the Sleuth Journal column that I write. And if they want to donate or whatever, they feel free. And I'm semi-retired, and I spend at least 10 to 20 hours a week working on the weekly bulletins that I do. So that helps. They can also get autographed DVDs on there. There's some links to eBay. I think there's a couple of autographed DVDs of A Funny Thing and Astronauts Gone Wild. And just appreciate your prayers too. If you believe, pray for the truth to come out, that we live to see a confession of the government that the moon landings are fake. I mean, that would be a beautiful, beautiful thing. It'd be like popping a boil. A little messy, but it would cause healing. If we don't cut off this gangrene of the moon landings being fake, then the government is going to become more diseased.
Eventually it's gonna be exposed, because I think eventually when it comes up to the 100th year, and then you're going on to 150 years and we still haven't been back, eventually history will, this will come out, because there'll be no way to deny it. They'll just say, well, we never went back because we never could. And I think once all the people that were involved die, all the CIA and NASA and everything, then I think it's going to be exposed. But hopefully you will still be on record with having exposed the whole thing, because like I said, you are a hero of mine and many others. We totally appreciate your tireless efforts. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this interview with me. It's been an honor and a privilege to have you on. And so Sabrell.com, and you can also find him on Bart Sabrell on YouTube. That's where I go to see all of his most recent videos and his most popular videos. And anything else you want to say before I close it out?
Well, we're going to start something called End Time Radio, maybe 2 broadcasts a month, which will be posted to YouTube. It'll have its own playlist on my YouTube channel, and that'll be kind of life from a biblical point of view we'll start talking about.
Sure. All righty. Well, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been very eye-opening. It went exactly how I thought it would, except for me bumbling around and sounding so nervous. I'm actually still nervous, but it's only because I'm in the presence of such greatness. I want to tell you that I love you. I love your work. You have 100% support from me. I'm going to continue promoting you on my Facebook page. And I want to thank everybody for listening tonight. I am going to make a YouTube video in which Bart Sabrell has given me the authority to use his footage for this interview, so I will not get a copyright strike. And I will be posting that video on YouTube. Again, I want to thank everybody for listening. This is Madison Star Moon. I want everybody to look up, wake up, and do something. Thanks, guys.